My first video on this channel in 2020 was of my favorite films, and now I'm back 5 years later to share my new top 10 favorite films of all time. If you're new around here, make sure to subscribe, and now let's get started with number 10. Rebel Without a Cause. Rebel Without a Cause is a 1955 film starring the Holy Trinity, James Dean, Natalie Wood, and Sal Mineo. I love this film because of the way it captures the trials and tribulations of being a teenager. Falling in love, the jealousy, the child parenting the parent trope.
I'm not going to use me as an excuse again.
There's fights, car races, running away to abandoned places. It's the ultimate coming-of-age film. And for me, a very relatable film as Jim, played by James Dean, transfers to a new school and ultimately just wants to fit in. It's also set in Los Angeles, which is where I went to high school. One of my all-time favorite quotes also comes from Rebel Without a Cause. There's a scene where the upperclassmen visit the Griffith Observatory for a field trip, and the instructor in the planetarium says,
"The problems of man seem trivial and naive indeed."
Number 9, Dog Day Afternoon. This was the second film I watched when I went to NYU. Dog Day Afternoon introduced me to Al Pacino, who stars in this true hostage robbery 1975 film directed by Sidney Lumet. I never thought that a story that takes place at one location for 90% of the film would be so good. Of course, what carries it is its incredible casting, not just with Pacino, but with John Cazale, Chris Sarandon, all of the extras, and literally everyone else, especially in the bank. While hostage situations in films have predictable outcomes, this one's reasoning, especially for it being based on a true story, is what makes Dog Day Afternoon so special, and of course, Al Pacino yelling Attica. Number 8, A Place in the Sun. A Place in the Sun is a 1951 character-driven tragic romance. It is the classic love triangle story with a twist. George Eastman, played by Montgomery Clift, just wants a new life. And in this life, there's the woman he wants but can't have, so he settles for the woman he can. Then he somehow gets the woman he wanted and has to figure out a way to get the woman he settled for now out of his life. Yeah. But what makes this beyond just a typical can't have your cake and eat it too is the pure anguish and internal conflict we witness through Montgomery's fantastic acting. It also helps that Elizabeth Taylor stars opposite of him. Number 7, Call Me By Your Name. One out of the two 21st century films on my list, Call Me By Your Name is one of the most beautifully shot, beautifully paced films starring Timothée Chalamet, directed by Luca Guadagnino. Now, I got into watching movies pretty late at 19, and this was one of the first few movies that I had watched. It's a perfect summer film that really romanticizes the simplicity of life as it's set in 1983. The stillness, the music, the swimming, the biking, the conversations over meals. That sort of summer experience feels so lost in this day and age of technology and social media, so I always like to revisit Call Me By Your Name anytime I wish to escape to northern Italy and vicariously experience a nostalgic summer love. It also introduced me to Sufjan Stevens, which his music greatly enhances this film, along with the already fantastic acting, locations, and directing. Number 6, West Side Story. I'm a huge fan of movie musicals, but the original 1961 West Side Story takes the cake. It's a modern-day Romeo and Juliet where two gangs, the Sharks versus the Jets, battle for their turf in New York, and it becomes complicated when one of the Jets, Tony, falls in love with Maria, the Sharks' sister. It's incredibly inventive for 1960s. It's filled with so much color and thoughtful direction, and its blocking and choreography by none other than Jerome Robbins. It has amazing music from Leonard Bernstein, stars Natalie Wood, who is also in one of my other favorite films, Rebel Without a Cause, and it just overall is such a fun time, ultimately about a forbidden romance with a strong B-story about identity, coupled with amazing mise-en-scène, costumes, the production production design, the production value. There's just so much action and music all around for it to become an instant classic for me. Number 5, Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is the other 21st century film released in 2023 that easily sneaked its way up into my top 5. I've watched it 13 times in the theater on standard, IMAX, 70mm, I own the Blu-ray, and I have loved every single second of it. If you didn't know, I'm a huge astrophysics nerd. I studied it for a little bit at NYU, so usually any movie involving physics is super high on my list. I also really love movies, as I've mentioned, with high production values, which Christopher Nolan never falters on. And with Oppenheimer in particular, I really loved 1, the story and the structure in which it was told between fission versus fusion, and 2, Emma Thomas and the way it was produced. There's the locations, the phenomenal jam-packed cast, the extras, which added so much to the production value and depth of shots. There's the Amadeus versus Salieri dynamic between Oppenheimer and Strauss. I loved the recreation of the time period at Berkeley in Germany, the recreation of Los Alamos, nothing being done with CGI. I mean, this is the true meaning and making of tentpole cinema. As an aspiring filmmaker myself, I always rewatch Oppenheimer to remind me of the possibilities of filmmaking. Number 4, Amadeus. Speaking of Amadeus versus Salieri, Amadeus is a 1984 film about the life of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, narrated by the confessions of Antonio Salieri, once Amadeus's confidant, or so he thought. Salieri was actually incredibly jealous of him and eventually blamed himself for Mozart's death.
Is it not good?
It is miraculous.
Amadeus is such a beautiful film, filled of course with Mozart's music, but also recreations of the operas that he would put on. It's actually really infuriating seeing the way in which his life panned out and how completely alone and used he must have felt in that short time that he had lived. As we know in the film, Mozart was never appreciated during his time alive.
Too many notes.
And it's really sad that he never got to see the success as what we know him as. Now, the film itself is a mise-en-scene masterpiece. The production design is top tier, the costume designs are unbelievable, especially with the meaning behind certain colors, like Salieri wears black when he's living in Mozart's shadows, and red when he feels like God is on his side. Every time the shot pushes in on Salieri, it's to signify his moments of jealousy towards Mozart. So there's a lot of intention and fantastic directing by Milos Forman. Number 3, Goodfellas. The 1990 cult classic Goodfellas has made its way into my top 3. As I mentioned, as a huge lover of high concept, high production value films, Goodfellas, a mafia mob movie, is the epitome of that. I love the switch of structure, how it first starts with a huge time jump from adolescence to adulthood, then jumps through time during Henry and Karen's relationship, and then having the latter half of the movie slow completely down and told in segments of time within 24 hours. It of course stars iconic actors like Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta. There's fast and fun action, comedy with a touch of Italian tradition.
Shut up, you're always talking.
Goodfellas is the ultimate flip. I've talked briefly about this film in my Martin Scorsese video, but the mise-en-scène is sublime. The production design is one of my all-time favorites. I love all of Martin Scorsese's composition choices, all the push-ins, the long takes. Truly, Martin Scorsese is the king of all things mafia-related, and similarly to Oppenheimer, Goodfellas just reminds me the boundless possibilities of filmmaking.
Gangster.
Number 2, Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane is exactly what you know it to be, the greatest film ever made. We flash back into Charles Foster Kane's life, becoming this wealthy publisher, and uncover the meaning behind his last words, Rosebud. This film was made in 1941 by a literal 25-year-old child, yet still looks like it could have been made today. Orson Welles was 80 years ahead, implementing the most insane transitions, like here, when it pushes into a picture frame, transitions into a real-life recreation of the photo, and then Charles himself breaks the fourth wall by talking to the audience. It's fantastic lighting, fantastic compositions, there's his odes to the silent era, and on top of all of this, it's just a really great concept of a film to watch without even realizing all the ingenious technical elements behind it. Now, you may be asking, how is Citizen Kane then your second favorite film if you love it so much? Well guys, I have to stay tried and true to the first film I ever watched at NYU, Children of Men. Children of Men is a 2006 sci-fi film directed by my all-time favorite director, Alfonso Cuarón. After decades of infertility, a woman is found to be pregnant in the year 2027. The concept is extremely bizarre, but luckily it fell in the hands of Cuarón's masterful direction and Lubezki's actually insane cinematography. Together, they created the textbook definition of masterful long one-shots. Throughout the film, they have multiple 4 to 6 minute one-shots, each involving a great deal of extras, blocking, violence, action, explosion. It's an unreal movie that kills one of its main characters in 15 minutes. Children of Men brings us through the beautiful yet gritty and obviously dystopian landscapes of England. It stars Clive Owen, who's amazing, and Michael Caine as supporting, who is hilarious.
Pull my finger.
And on every technical aspect possible, it is one of the most cinematic films of all time. Alfonso Cuarón is also most famously known for Roma, Gravity, Y Tu Mama Tambien, and Children of Men will continue to stay my #1 film for all time, not only because of how amazing it is, but also because Cuarón is one of the most inspiring directors to me. I do, of course, have a few honorable mentions. Pride and Prejudice is my favorite romance. Ikiru and In the Mood for Love are two of my favorite foreign films. The Aviator has slowly crept up to be one of my favorite Scorsese films after Goodfellas. And Tangled, like in my last favorites video, and forevermore will be my favorite animated comfort movie. Phew! So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see my top 10 favorite foreign films, let me know. I'd love to do that eventually too. Make sure to drop your top 3 favorite films in the comments down below. If you want to know what movies I'm watching, I am back on Letterboxd, so check me out there. So with that, I will see you guys next time for another new video. Bye!